10,000 years, not a single shot fired. Not one diplomatic incident requiring more than Form 7B in triplicate. The Galactic Concordance had achieved what every civilization dreams of. Perfect, uninterrupted, soul-crushingly boring peace. And then the humans showed up, not with weapons, not with threats, not even with a decent understanding of where they were. No, the humans arrived in the galactic community the same way a drunk uncle arrives at a wedding, completely by accident, inappropriately dressed, and absolutely confident they were doing everything right. This is the story of how Zilvex Prenderquist, a mid-level filing clerk who hadn't had an original thought in 4 centuries, accidentally discovered that Earth existed, and how Captain Renner Quisk, a cargo hauler with the navigational skills of a concussed moth, managed to destroy 10 millennia of carefully constructed peace in less time than it takes to properly fill out a concordance registration form, which, for the record, takes 11 days. Zilvex worked in Sub-Basement 7 of the Concordance archives on Thelonious Prime. If you've never been to Thelonious Prime, consider yourself fortunate. The entire planet was essentially one massive filing cabinet, and Zilvex's job was to ensure that every single document in the galaxy was properly cross-referenced, color-coded, and stored in alphabetical order by species, star system, and ambient temperature preference. He'd been doing this job for 473 years. 473 years of watching the same beige walls, reading the same beige forms, and experiencing what could only be described as beige emotions. The Concordance was very good at peace. It was also phenomenally good at making sure nobody enjoyed it. On this particular day, which happened to be a 5th day, which is exactly as uninspiring as it sounds, Zilvex was processing intake forms from the outer rim when he noticed something peculiar. There was a gap in the files, a physical gap between the Tyrellian Consortium and the Tholian Assembly. There should have been approximately 47 member species, alphabetically speaking. There were 46. Now, you might think that discovering a missing civilization would prompt immediate action, perhaps even mild concern. But Zilvex had been trained in the Concordance way. The proper response was to fill out a discrepancy report, file it with the Anomalies Committee, wait for the standard 90-day review period, and then attend a meeting where 17 different subcommittees would discuss whether the discrepancy was worth investigating. But Zilvex was 3 days away from his 5-century review, and he was desperate for literally anything interesting to put on his performance assessment. So he did something radical, something dangerous, something that would ultimately doom galactic civilization as everyone knew it. He looked into it himself. The missing entry was labeled Ter 3 Registration Pending. The file date was 10,000 years old. The follow-up date was never. Someone had started the registration process for a species on a planet called Earth, and then apparently forgotten about it entirely. Not maliciously, not strategically, just forgotten. Like a library book you keep meaning to return, but it's been under the car seat for a decade, and you've already paid more in late fees than the book cost. Zilvex stared at the file for a solid 15 minutes, which was the longest he'd focused on anything since his honeymoon with Plixara back in 2847. He pulled up the stellar coordinates, still there. The planet was still there. He pulled up the bioscans. Still populated, still broadcasting radio waves and everything. "Oh, my various gods!" Zilvex shouted, which caused Grimfala 3 desks over to spill her stimulant beverage all over her intake forms. Shouting was definitely against protocol. Zilvex dove deeper into the files, his 3-fingered hands trembling with something he vaguely remembered as excitement. According to the initial survey, Earth was a Class M planet, standard oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, one species showing signs of tool use and primitive technology. The surveyor had filed the initial paperwork, noted that Earth was unremarkable but stable, and scheduled a follow-up visit in 50 years. That follow-up never happened. because the surveyor, a particularly forgetful Blavian named Quex, had filed the follow-up form under Ter 8 instead of Ter 3 due to a transcription error. And for 10,000 years, nobody had noticed. Earth had been sitting there, evolving, developing, advancing, completely unaware that there was a galactic civilization 12 light-years away, and completely unaware that the Concordance had rules. So many rules. Rules about first contact, rules about technological development thresholds, rules about proper diplomatic introduction protocols. The Concordance took peace seriously, and the only way to maintain peace was to make absolutely certain that every species followed the exact same rules. Failure to follow the rules meant chaos, and chaos meant conflict, and conflict meant work for people other than filing clerks, which was unacceptable. Zilvex knew he should report this through proper channels. He should file Form 18Q for delayed first contact, wait for the traditional introduction committee to convene, and then spend the next several decades working through the proper protocols. But he was so close to retirement, and this could be his legacy. Zilvex Prenderquist, the clerk who discovered a whole missing civilization. They might even name a filing system after him, so he did the second stupid thing. He filed an emergency first contact alert. He marked it Priority 1, and he scheduled the Earthlings for immediate integration into the Concordance, without reading the rest of their file. Captain Rena Quisk did not consider herself a pioneer. She did not consider herself brave, innovative, or particularly bright. What she did consider herself was extremely good at delivering frozen synthetic meats to the outer belt stations, which was a very specific skill set that didn't often come up in polite conversation. Her ship, the presumptuous Narwhal, was a Hawk-class cargo freighter that had been old when her grandmother was young. It rattled when it shouldn't rattle, went silent when it shouldn't be silent, and had a habit of making a sound like someone gargling gravel whenever she engaged the main thrusters. Rena loved it the way you love an extremely stupid dog who keeps running into walls but wags its tail enthusiastically afterward. Her crew consisted of herself, her co-pilot Davrik Scholes, who communicated primarily through sighs and sarcasm, and their engineer Jofia Trem, who had the remarkable ability to fix absolutely anything with duct tape and what she called aggressive optimism. On this particular day, they were hauling 17,000 kilograms of frozen synthetic beef substitute to Callisto Station when Davrik made an observation. "Huh," he said. Rena had learned over 8 years of flying with Davrik that "huh" could mean anything from "we're about to die" to "I just realized I'd been reading this star chart upside down for 3 hours." The tone was important. This was a confused "huh." That was usually manageable. "Huh what?" Rena asked, not looking up from her navigation console, which was currently displaying an error message that translated roughly to, "I give up, you figure it out." "We've got a gravity anomaly," Davrik said, tapping his scanner. "Big one, right in our flight path." Rena leaned over to look at his display. There was indeed a gravity anomaly, a significant one, the kind that suggested either a small black hole, a collapsed star, or someone had installed a very aggressive speed bump in the middle of space. "Can we go around it?" she asked. "Sure. Add 4 days to our journey and void our delivery bonus." Rena did some quick mental math. 4 extra days meant eating through their supply cushion. It meant arriving late. It meant Callisto Station would dock their pay. It meant ramen noodles for the next 3 months instead of the good instant noodles with the little freeze-dried vegetables. "Can we go through it?" she asked. Davrik looked at her with the expression of a man who had learned to stop being surprised by terrible decisions. "Through the gravity anomaly. I mean, gravity is just curved space-time, right? We travel through curved space-time all the time. This is very curved space-time, Captain." From the engine room, Jofia's voice crackled over the intercom. "If you're thinking about flying through that thing, I'm just going to say preemptively, I can fix whatever breaks, but I'm going to be really annoyed about it." Rena studied the anomaly readings. It wasn't behaving like a black hole. The gravity well was there, but it was stable, almost artificial, like a tunnel, like something deliberately placed there. "What if it's a wormhole?" Renner said. Davrik blinked. "What if it's a what?" "A wormhole. You know, theoretical shortcut through space-time. Scientists have been talking about them for decades." "Scientists have also been talking about cold fusion and world peace, Captain. Doesn't mean I'm betting my life on either." But Renner was already running calculations. If it was a stable wormhole, and if they could navigate through it, they might actually save time. They might arrive early. They might get a bonus instead of a penalty. "Jofia," Renner called over the intercom. "How's the structural integrity?" "On this ship, it's more of a suggestion than integrity, Captain." "Good enough. Davrik, plot a course straight through the center of that anomaly. Nice and steady." Davrik turned in his chair to face her directly. "Renner, I say this with all the professional courtesy our 8 years together deserve. Are you out of your goddamn mind?" "Probably, but we're doing it anyway. Engage main thrusters." The presumptuous narwhal, which had never been accused of grace or intelligence, lumbered toward the gravity anomaly like an elderly walrus approaching a fish market. The ship began to shake, then to rattle, then to make sounds that metal should definitely not make. "We're approaching the event horizon," Davrik shouted over the noise. "If we're going to turn back, it has to be now." "Hold steady!" Renner shouted back, gripping her armrests hard enough to leave finger impressions. The ship plunged into the anomaly, and reality turned inside out. If you've never experienced wormhole travel, the sensation is difficult to describe. Imagine being compressed to the size of a molecule while simultaneously expanding to the size of a galaxy. Now imagine doing that while also experiencing every moment of your life at once, while tasting colors and hearing textures, while your inner ear insists you're falling in 17 different directions. Now imagine doing all of that while 17,000 kilograms of frozen synthetic beef substitute decides to test the limits of your cargo restraints. The presumptuous narwhal shot out of the other side of the wormhole like a champagne cork fired from a particle accelerator. Alarms were screaming, lights were flashing. Somewhere in the cargo hold, something was definitely on fire, which was impressive given that fire requires oxygen and cargo holds are theoretically sealed. Renner blinked the stars out of her vision and checked their position. The navigation computer was displaying what could only be described as a series of question marks, followed by what might have been profanity. "Where are we?" Davrik yelled, still gripping his console like it was the only real thing in the universe. Renner pulled up the star charts. Then she pulled them up again, because the first reading had to be wrong. Then she pulled them up a third time, because the second reading matched the first reading, and that was impossible. "Davrik," she said slowly, "according to these charts, we're 12 light-years from Earth." 12 light-years? "Renner, we left Earth's orbit 3 hours ago." "I know! We went 400 meters." "I know! That's not how distance works." "I know!" Jofia's voice came over the intercom, suspiciously calm. "So, captains, you're going to want to see this." Renner and Davrik stumbled back to the cargo hold, where Jofia was standing at the observation port, staring out into space with the expression of someone who has just realized the universe is significantly larger than they'd previously assumed. Outside the window was a structure, not a space station, not an asteroid, a structure, a massive gleaming lattice of impossible geometry that seemed to fold in on itself in ways that made your eyes hurt if you looked at it too long. It stretched for thousands of kilometers in every direction, covered in lights and what appeared to be windows, docking bays, landing platforms, and ships. Hundreds of ships, thousands of ships. Ships in shapes that defied aerodynamics and common sense. Ships that looked like flowers, ships that looked like geometric nightmares, ships that looked like someone had asked a particularly creative child to design a spaceship and then actually built it. "Captain," Davrik said quietly, "I don't think we're in the solar system anymore." Before Renner could respond, their communications console lit up like a Christmas tree having an electrical seizure. Every frequency, every channel, every possible method of communication was suddenly active, and then a voice, translated through what must have been the most sophisticated computer system Renner had ever encountered, spoke to them in perfect English. "Unknown vessel. This is Thelonious Prime Approach Control. You have entered concordant space without proper authorization, proper registration, or proper existence in our databases. Please state your species designation, homeworld origin, and which idiot gave you access to the restricted wormhole network." Renner, Davrik, and Jofia looked at each other. Renner said eloquently into the microphone. "This is Captain Renner Quisk of the cargo freighter Presumptuous Narwhal, registered out of Earth Sol system. We were trying to deliver frozen meat to Callisto Station, and we went through a thing." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, "I'm sorry. Did you say Earth?" Yes." Another long silence. Then, "Please hold. Do not move. Do not activate any weapons. Do not do anything. Just stay right there." The communication cut off. Jofia turned to Renner. "Captain, I'm just going to point out that we don't have any weapons." "Should we mention that?" Davrik shook his head. "Let's maybe not mention that right now." 3,000 kilometers away, in the central command center of Thelonious Prime, approximately 47 different alarm systems were currently arguing with each other about which emergency was most important. High Administrator Quelox Drin had been in charge of concordance operations for 600 years. In those 600 years, she had dealt with exactly 3 genuine crises: a paperwork backlog in 2847, a filing cabinet malfunction in 3119, and the Great Comma Debate of 4208, which had required 4 months of committee meetings to resolve. She was not prepared for this. "Run that by me again," she shouted at the communications officer, a nervous Rylakian named Prip, who was currently sweating through 3 layers of clothing. "A ship just came through the restricted wormhole network, Administrator, from Earth, a planet that's not in our database. They claim they were trying to deliver meat." "Meat? They came through a wormhole to deliver meat?" "Frozen meat, Administrator. Synthetic beef substitute, according to their cargo manifest." Quelox felt something she hadn't felt in several centuries, a stress headache. She pulled up the vessel's information on her display. It was primitive, laughably primitive. Chemical rockets, plasma thrusters that looked like they'd been assembled by someone who'd seen a picture of a real thruster once and tried to recreate it from memory. No shields, no weapons, no defensive systems whatsoever. "How did they even survive the wormhole transit?" she asked. Prip checked his readings. "According to their hull stress monitors, they mostly didn't. I'm reading system failures on approximately 70% of their ship. The fact that they're still alive is either a miracle or a testament to really aggressive duct tape." Quelox pulled up Earth's file, the one Zilvex had flagged, the one that was 10,000 years old. She read it once, then twice. Then she picked up her communication device and called Zilvex directly. "Zilvex!" she roared when he answered. "Did you authorize first contact with Earth?" I filed the proper emergency contact forms, Administrator, following protocol." "Following protocol? Zilvex, these beings barely have fusion power. They're still burning fossil fuels. They think 12 light years is an impressive distance. And you gave them access to the wormhole network?" I didn't give them access, Administrator. They just showed up." "They just showed up?" "Zilvex, the wormhole network has 17 layers of security protocols. You can't just show up in a wormhole." "Well, Administrator, they did." Quelox closed all 6 of her eyes and counted to 10 in 3 different languages. This was bad. This was very bad. An unregistered species had accessed the Concordance's most secure travel network. They'd done it by accident. They'd done it in a ship that looked like it was held together with hope and prayer. And according to the file, Earth had been developing for 10,000 years without concordance oversight, which meant they'd developed wrong. The concordance had very specific rules about how species were supposed to develop. First, achieve fusion power, then achieve superluminal communication, then and only then achieve superluminal travel. It was a tested system, a proven system, a system that ensured species were ready for the galaxy before they encountered it. Earth had apparently skipped several steps and stumbled into the galactic community through pure dumb luck. "Administrator," Prip said quietly, "what do we do with them?" Quelox thought about it. The proper protocol was clear. Unregistered species who accessed concordant space were to be quarantined, studied, and integrated slowly over several decades while they were educated about proper galactic society. But this ship, the presumptuous Narwhal, was broadcasting distress signals on 17 different frequencies. They were clearly in trouble, and the concordance had laws about rendering aid to ships in distress. "Bring them in," Quelox said. "Dock them in Quarantine Bay 7, full isolation protocols, and someone get me a xenopsychology team who specializes in primitive cultures." "Yes, Administrator. And Prip, get me every piece of information we have about Earth. I have a feeling this is about to get complicated." Renner had never been towed before. It was not a pleasant experience. The Concordance's tug ships were efficient, professional, and completely ignored every single one of her requests to just give us a minute to fix the starboard thruster. They were guided, pushed, and occasionally dragged to a massive docking bay inside the structure, which Renner was now reasonably certain was actually a space station the size of a small moon. The bay was empty except for them, which either meant they were very important or very dangerous. She suspected dangerous wasn't it. As soon as they docked, their entire ship was flooded with some kind of scanning beam. Renner felt it pass through her like warm, static electricity. "What the hell was that?" Davrik asked, checking his console. "Bioscan," Jofia said from the cargo hold, where she was trying to convince the fire suppression system to stop suppressing a fire that had already gone out. "They just scanned every molecule in our ship, including us." "Is that legal?" Renner shouted. "Captain, I don't think we're in a position to argue about legal right now." The airlock chimed. Someone wanted to board. Renner looked at her crew. Her tiny, exhausted, completely unprepared crew. "Well," she said, "let's go meet the neighbors." She opened the airlock. On the other side stood three beings that made Renner's brain briefly short-circuit. One was tall and insectoid, with 4 arms and compound eyes that glittered like disco balls. One was short and appeared to be made entirely of crystalline structures that hummed slightly. The third was roughly humanoid, but with blue skin, tentacle-like hair, and 7 fingers on each hand. They were all wearing uniforms. Very official-looking uniforms with badges and insignia that probably meant something important. The blue one stepped forward and spoke in perfect English. "Captain Quisk, I am Diplomatic Officer Willick Thross. Welcome to the Concordance. We need to have a very serious conversation about how you got here and what exactly you think you're doing." Renner blinked. We were delivering meat?" Willick's tentacle hair writhed in what was probably irritation. "Yes, we gathered that several times. What we're trying to understand is how a species that isn't supposed to exist yet managed to access a restricted wormhole that's been sealed for 5,000 years. Wait, sealed? It wasn't sealed. It was just there, in space, being all gravity-wellish." The crystalline being who hadn't been introduced made a sound like wind chimes having an argument. The insectoid one translated, "Ambassador Crix says that's impossible. The outer rim wormholes were sealed after the Drexin incident. They require specific quantum signatures to open." "Well, we didn't open it," Renner protested. "We just flew at it. That's how wormholes work, right? You fly at them and you go through them." All 3 aliens stared at her. "That's how you think wormholes work," Willick said, his tentacle hair now standing straight up. "You just..." Fly at them? I mean, yeah. What were we supposed to do, knock first? Willick turned to his companions and had a rapid conversation in what sounded like musical tones mixed with clicking noises. Ambassador Crix responded with something that sounded like breaking glass. The insectoid made a noise that was probably laughter or possibly digestive distress. Willick turned back to Renner. Captain Quisk, I need you to understand something very important. The Concordance has maintained perfect peace for 10,000 years. We have achieved this through careful regulation, strict protocols, and making absolutely certain that every species follows the same rules. Do you understand? Sure, Renner said. Do you actually understand? Or are you just agreeing? I mean, it sounds reasonable. Rules are good. We have rules on Earth. Do you follow them? Renner thought about the approximately 17 safety regulations she'd violated in the last week alone. Sometimes, Willick's skin color shifted from blue to purple. Captain, here's what's going to happen. We are going to take you and your crew to a comfortable facility. We're going to feed you, provide you with accommodations, and explain to you exactly how the Concordance works. Then we're going to arrange for your safe return to Earth, along with a complete wipe of your navigational data, so this never happens again. Does that sound acceptable? It did not sound acceptable. It sounded like they were being detained. But Renner was smart enough to recognize when she didn't have negotiating power. Sure, she said, but, quick question. What about our cargo? Your cargo. The meat. We've got a delivery schedule. If we don't get to Callisto Station soon, the whole shipment will spoil and we'll lose our contract. Willick stared at her. Ambassador Crix made a sound like a crystal-singing bowl being dropped downstairs. The insectoid's mandibles clicked rapidly. Captain, Willick said slowly, you just traveled 12 light years through a restricted wormhole into a galactic civilization you didn't know existed, and your primary concern is meat delivery. Well, yeah, I mean, this is interesting and all, but we've got bills to pay. Willick looked at his companions. They had another rapid conversation. Then Willick turned back to Renner with an expression that might have been respect, or might have been profound confusion. Captain Quisk, he said, I think you and your species are going to be a significant problem for the Concordance. He had no idea how right he was. The quarantine facility was actually quite nice, which made Renner suspicious. In her experience, when people were too nice, they usually wanted something. The rooms were clean, the beds were comfortable, and the food was, well, it was food. Edible food, which was already better than the presumptuous narwhal's galley on a good day. Davrik was suspicious too. This is weird, right? This is definitely weird. Oh, it's super weird, Jofia agreed, poking at something that looked like fruit but tasted like chicken. We accidentally find an alien civilization, and they're being polite about it. Where's the probing? Where's the imprisonment? Where's the take me to your leader stuff? Maybe they're more advanced than that, Renner suggested. More advanced, or more sinister, Davrik said ominously. Before Renner could respond, the door chimed. A holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing Diplomatic Officer Willick's face. Captain Quisk, I hope you're finding your accommodations satisfactory. I'm calling to inform you that we've scheduled your orientation for tomorrow morning. We'll be explaining Concordance protocols, galactic history, and proper diplomatic conduct. About that, Renner said. How long is this going to take? Because we've really got to get back to Earth. We've got that meat shipment and, Captain, I need you to understand that you can't just go back to Earth, not yet. Your planet isn't registered with the Concordance. You don't have diplomatic status. You don't have trade agreements. You don't have permission to exist in galactic space. Permission to exist. We've been existing just fine for millennia without permission. Yes, and that's the problem. You've been developing wrong. You have capitalism. You have nation-states. You have wars. Okay, first of all, we've been really good about the wars lately. You had one last month. That was a small war. Barely counts. More of a conflict, really. Willick's tentacle hair was writhing again. Captain, do you understand what the Concordance is? It's an alliance of 4,712 species who have agreed to follow the same rules. No conflicts, no unauthorized expansion, no disruption of the peace. We have achieved perfect harmony by ensuring everyone does things the same way. But doesn't that get boring? There was a long silence. Boring? Willick sputtered. Boring! Captain, we have eliminated war. We have eliminated poverty. We have eliminated crime. We have achieved a utopia that billions of beings died to create over millennia of struggle. Right. But what do you do all day? Another long silence. We maintain the peace. Okay, but how? Like, what's your hobby? What do you do for fun? Willick's face on the hologram looked genuinely confused. Fun? You know, fun. Recreation. The stuff you do when you're not working. We file reports. We attend committee meetings. We maintain the peace. Renner, Davrik, and Jofia exchanged looks. Oh no, Jofia whispered. They've bureaucratized peace. They've made peace boring. Willick either didn't hear or chose to ignore this. Your orientation is tomorrow at 800 station time. Please be prompt. The Concordance values punctuality. The hologram vanished. Davrik flopped onto his bed. We're doomed. We've stumbled into a galactic civilization run by middle management. It's worse than that, Jofia said. We've stumbled into a galactic civilization that's been doing nothing but middle management for 10,000 years. Can you imagine how many forms they have? Renner paced the room, thinking. Something about this situation didn't sit right with her. Not the aliens, not the space station, not even the fact that humanity had apparently been developing wrong for millennia. It was the fact that they'd gotten here at all. Davrik, she said slowly, that wormhole, you said it was sealed, right? According to the bug dude, yeah. Sealed for 5,000 years. But we went through it. In a ship with the technological sophistication of a microwave oven, without any special codes or quantum signatures or whatever. Davrik sat up. You're right. That's weird. What if, Renner said, thinking out loud, what if we weren't supposed to be able to get through? What if something about US or our ship let us through? Jofia's eyes widened. Are you saying we accidentally hacked a wormhole without trying? I'm saying maybe. I'm saying it's weird that they're so concerned about us being here. I'm saying it's weird that they want to orient us before sending us back. I'm saying maybe we broke something just by existing, and they're trying to figure out what. Davrik groaned. Great. So not only did we crash a galactic peace party, we broke the lock on the way in. We didn't break it, Renner protested. We used it. That's not breaking. Captain, in my experience, when you do something accidentally that people spent 5,000 years trying to prevent, that's definitely breaking it. They sat in silence for a moment, contemplating the magnitude of what they'd stumbled into. Finally, Jofia spoke. So, question. Do we tell them we might have accidentally hacked their wormhole? Renner thought about it. Then she thought about the Concordance's obvious love of rules and regulations. Then she thought about what happens to people who break rules in rule-obsessed civilizations. No, she said firmly. No, we do not tell them. We go to their orientation, we smile, we nod, we learn everything we can, and then we get the hell back to Earth and warn people before the Concordance shows up on our doorstep with 10,000 years of regulatory compliance forms. That's probably illegal, Davrik pointed out. Probably, but so is everything else we've done in the last 6 hours, so we might as well commit. And so, with a plan that was only slightly better than panic and run, the crew of the presumptuous narwhal prepared for their first official contact with galactic civilization. It would go exactly as well as you'd expect. The orientation room was designed for comfort, which immediately put Renner on edge. There were chairs, or at least things shaped like chairs, arranged in neat rows. There were displays on the walls showing peaceful images of various alien civilizations doing peaceful things peacefully. There was even soothing music playing, which sounded like someone had recorded ocean waves and then auto-tuned them into submission. Renner, Davrik and Jofia were the only attendees, which made the whole thing feel less like an orientation and more like an intervention. Willick stood at the front of the room, his tentacle hair now braided into something resembling professional composure. Behind him, a massive display screen showed the concordance seal, a complicated geometric pattern that probably meant something profound, but mostly looked like someone had dropped a spirograph and decided to make it official. "Welcome," Willick began, "to your introduction to the concordance. Before we begin, do you have any questions?" Renner raised her hand. "Yes." "Are we prisoners?" "No." "Are we free to leave?" "Not yet." "Then we're prisoners." Willick's skin shifted to a frustrated shade of purple. "You're guests, involuntary guests who can't leave until we're certain you won't disrupt galactic peace. So, prisoners." "Moving on," Willick said loudly. "The Concordance was founded 10,000 years ago after the Great Conflict, a war so devastating that it nearly destroyed this entire region of space. Billions died, whole species went extinct. Planets were rendered uninhabitable. It was, by all accounts, really, really bad." The screen behind him showed images of the devastation. Even across millennia and through translation, the horror was evident. Renner felt her stomach clench. "In the aftermath," Willick continued, "the surviving species came together and asked a simple question: how do we make sure this never happens again? And they found an answer. Rules, regulations, protocols, standards. If everyone follows the same rules, there can be no conflict. Do you understand?" "Sure," Renner said, "but how do you get everyone to agree on the rules?" "We don't get everyone to agree. We make the rules so comprehensive and so strictly enforced that there's no room for disagreement. Every species follows the exact same development path. Every planet is integrated using the exact same protocol. Every dispute is resolved through the exact same mediation process." "There are no exceptions," Jofia raised her hand. "That sounds kind of terrible." "It's peace," Willick insisted. "Perfect, unbroken, legally mandated peace." "But what if someone doesn't want to follow the rules?" Davrik asked. Willick smiled. It was not a comforting smile. "Then they're not part of the Concordance. And if they're not part of the Concordance, they don't exist, legally speaking." The room went very quiet. "You mean you just ignore them?" Renner asked. "We mean they have no legal standing. They can't trade with Concordance members. They can't travel through Concordance space. They can't access Concordance resources. They are systematically isolated until they agree to join properly." "That's extortion." "That's peace," Willick countered. "Captain, I understand this seems harsh, but you have to understand the alternative. The Great Conflict happened because species were allowed to develop independently, with different values, different goals, different systems. Chaos breeds conflict. Uniformity breeds peace." Renner felt something twist in her gut. She'd never been great at following rules, but she'd always understood their purpose: safety, fairness, preventing people from hurting each other. But this was something else. This was rules for the sake of rules, compliance for the sake of compliance. "What if," she said carefully, "what if a species doesn't fit your rules? What if they're just fundamentally different?" "Then they adapt," Willick said. "Captain, the Concordance has integrated thousands of species. We have protocols for every conceivable variation in biology, culture, and psychology. There are no exceptions." "You keep saying that," Jofia observed. "The no exceptions thing. You say it a lot." Willick's tentacles twitched. "Because it's important. The moment you make an exception, the whole system breaks down. If one species gets special treatment, every species wants special treatment, and then we're back to chaos." "Or," Davrik suggested, "you could just let species be different. Work with the differences instead of trying to eliminate them." "We tried that! It started a war!" The outburst echoed in the quiet room. Willick took a moment to compose himself, his skin shifting through several colors before settling back to blue. "I apologize," he said quietly. The concordance is personal for me. My ancestors died in the great conflict. My entire species almost went extinct. The peace we have now, as imperfect as it might seem to you, is everything. It's the difference between existence and extinction." Rena felt a pang of sympathy. She got it. She really did. Fear was a powerful motivator. And fear of extinction? That was primal, but something still nagged at her. "Willick," she said, "in 10,000 years of peace, has anything, I don't know, changed? Changed? Yeah, like, has anyone invented anything new? Discovered anything? Had any big cultural movements or artistic revolutions or scientific breakthroughs?" Willick looked genuinely confused by the question. "Why would we need to change? We have peace." And there it was. The thing that had been bothering Rena since they'd arrived. This wasn't a civilization. This was a museum, a carefully preserved, meticulously maintained, completely static museum of what civilization used to be before everyone got too scared to risk change. "Oh no," she whispered. "What?" Davrik asked. "We're not just going to disrupt their peace," Rena said, her eyes wide. "We're going to disrupt their stagnation. They've been sitting still for 10,000 years. And we just showed them that movement is possible." Jofia caught on immediately. "And if they've been sitting still, that means all their old conflicts, all their old problems, all their old grievances, they haven't been solved. They've just been frozen." Willick was looking increasingly uncomfortable. "I don't know what you're implying, but how many species wanted to join the concordance?" Rena interrupted. "And how many were encouraged? We don't force anyone to. You systematically isolate them until they have no choice. That's not joining, that's surrendering." Willick's face had gone from blue to a deep, angry purple. "Captain Quisk, I think we're done with orientation for today." "Good, because I think we're done being oriented." Rena stood up. "You know what? Thank you for the explanation. It's been very educational. But I think we're going to head back to Earth now and—" "You can't!" Everyone froze. "What do you mean, we can't?" Rena asked slowly. Willick looked miserable. I mean the authorization hasn't come through yet. For your return voyage. It requires committee approval, multiple committees. It could take months." "Months? Or possibly years. The last unscheduled first contact took 17 years to process." Davrik stood up so fast his chair fell over. "You're telling us we're stuck here for 17 years? Not necessarily. Could be less. Probably won't be more than 30. 30 years?" All three humans shouted in unison. Willick held up his hands defensively. "Look, I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. This is standard protocol for what? For accidentally stumbling into your cosmic bureaucracy, for unregistered species who pose a risk to what? To your precious peace? We're three idiots in a meat freighter. What are we possibly going to do?" As it turned out, quite a lot. The argument in the orientation room had attracted attention. Within an hour, 17 different concordance departments wanted to interview the humans. Within 3 hours, the interviews had turned into interrogations. Within 6 hours, the interrogations had revealed something that made every concordance official simultaneously panic. Earth wasn't just accidentally unregistered. Earth was philosophically incompatible with the concordance. High Administrator Quelox Drin sat in her office, surrounded by reports from xenopsychologists, sociologists, and several people whose job titles were so specific they required acronyms. Every single report said the same thing, just in increasingly alarmed language. The humans were wrong. Not dangerous wrong, not malicious wrong, just fundamentally, structurally, impossibly wrong. They had no unified world government. They had multiple competing economic systems. They had something called democracy, where people voted on their leaders instead of following proven optimization algorithms. They had art that served no practical purpose. They had sports where people competed just for fun. They had humor, which apparently involved saying things that weren't true for the purpose of causing laughter. They were chaos in species form, and they'd accessed the wormhole network. Quelox pulled up the engineering report on the presumptuous narwhal. It was fascinating. The ship shouldn't work. It couldn't work. The power ratios were wrong. The shielding was insufficient. The navigation systems were held together with what the engineers had called hope and profanity, and yet it had survived wormhole transit. Because the humans hadn't tried to survive, they'd just done it. Without understanding why it was impossible, they'd done the impossible thing. Which meant, and this was the part that made Quelox's head hurt, if humans could do the impossible accidentally, what could they do on purpose? She buzzed her assistant. "Prip, get me every security recording of the humans since they arrived. I need to see how they behave when they think no one's watching." "Right away, Administrator." The recordings were educational. In the quarantine facility, Rena had apparently decided that the furniture arrangement was inefficient and rearranged everything to create what she called better flow. The furniture was bolted down. She'd unbolted it. Davrik had examined the food synthesizer, declared it unnecessarily complicated, and somehow simplified the interface by removing 17 safety protocols and adding what he called a randomize button. Jofia had gotten bored and disassembled the climate control system to see how it worked, then reassembled it in a way that shouldn't have functioned, but did, and now also played music when you adjusted the temperature. They'd been there for 1 day, and they'd already improved 3 different systems by breaking them. "Oh no," Quelox whispered, watching Jofia explain to a bewildered maintenance crew that sometimes you just gotta hit it with a wrench and believe in yourself. She pulled up the file on human psychology. The report was 17,000 pages long, which was already concerning. She skipped to the summary. Humans are characterized by an inability to accept the status quo. They exhibit constant dissatisfaction with existing systems, regardless of functionality. They demonstrate compulsive innovation even when innovation is unnecessary. They show pathological optimism in the face of impossible odds. They possess what appears to be a species-wide disregard for proper procedures. The report concluded, "Under no circumstances should humans be integrated into concordant society without extensive re-education. Their presence would destabilize 10,000 years of carefully maintained peace." Quelox read that last line 3 times. Then she buzzed Prip again. "Call an emergency session of the High Council, Priority 1. Tell them we have a situation." The High Council met in a chamber designed to inspire cooperation and calm deliberation. It was a massive circular room with holographic projectors showing peaceful scenes from thousands of worlds. The council members sat in a perfect circle, each representative equidistant from every other, ensuring no one had positional advantage. There were 247 council members representing every major species in the concordance. They met once every 6 months to discuss matters of galactic importance, which usually meant rubber-stamping committee recommendations and adjourning for lunch. They had not been called into emergency session in 400 years. Quelox stood in the center of the circle, surrounded by 247 sets of eyes, compound eyes, eye stalks, optical sensors, and things that weren't technically eyes, but served the same function. "Counselors," she began. 3 days ago, a ship from an unregistered world entered concordant space through a restricted wormhole. The species on board are called humans. Their homeworld is called Earth, and they represent the single greatest threat to galactic peace in 10,000 years. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Councillor Vrex of the Thelid Collective raised a primary appendage. Administrator, surely you're exaggerating. How can 3 beings in a primitive cargo ship threaten galactic peace? Because, Quelloch said, pulling up a holographic display of Earth, they're not just 3 beings. They represent a civilization of 8 billion beings, all of whom share the same tendencies. She showed them the recordings. Renner rearranging furniture, Davrik simplifying complex systems, Joffia improving things through sheer force of will and duct tape. She showed them Earth's history, wars, revolutions, technological leaps, artistic movements, political upheavals, a species that had gone from primitive agriculture to nuclear weapons in less than 10,000 years. She showed them Earth's current state, fragmented, chaotic, competitive, creative, completely, utterly, fundamentally incompatible with everything the Concordance stood for. They don't have rules, Quelloch said quietly. I mean, they do, but they treat them as suggestions. They have something they call civil disobedience, where they deliberately break rules to prove the rules are unjust. They have innovation, where they deliberately try to make things different just to see if different is better. They have debate, where they argue with each other for fun. Councillor Sthex of the Serpentine Hegemony spoke up, her voice sibilant with concern. But, Administrator, we've dealt with chaotic species before. We simply integrate them slowly, re-educate them, bring them into compliance. We can't, Quelloch interrupted. Don't you see? The other chaotic species were isolated. They had no way to resist integration, but the humans, they found a wormhole. They accessed our network. They have 12 billion more humans back on Earth who now know we exist. So we quarantine Earth, suggested Councillor Prax of the Silicon Collective. Seal the wormhole, ensure they can't access it again. We tried. Engineering spent the last 3 days trying to figure out how they accessed it in the first place. The wormhole should have been sealed. It was sealed, with quantum locks that require specific resonance frequencies to open. Then how did they— We don't know, Quelloch shouted, losing her composure. They just did it. They flew at it and went through, like the laws of physics were suggestions. The council chamber fell silent. Finally, Councillor Jean of the Luminar Federation spoke, her crystalline voice tinkling like worried chimes. Administrator, what exactly are you suggesting? Quelloch took a deep breath. I'm suggesting that the humans have done something no species has done in 10,000 years. They've proven that the Concordance's control isn't absolute, that our locked doors can be opened, that our sealed borders can be crossed. And if they can do it accidentally, how long before other species try to do it on purpose? The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The Concordance, Quelloch continued, is built on the assumption that we control access, that we decide who joins and when, that we manage integration and ensure compliance, but the humans didn't ask to join. They just showed up. And if they showed up, who else might show up? What other sealed wormholes might they accidentally unlock? What other impossible things might they do just because they don't know they're impossible? Councillor Vrex clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. So we're not worried about the humans themselves. We're worried about what they represent. Exactly. They represent change. And change is the one thing the Concordance can't handle. We've spent 10,000 years making sure nothing changes. We've optimized peace. We've perfected stability. And now 3 idiots in a meat freighter have proven that stability isn't perfect and peace isn't optimized. And nothing we've built is as secure as we thought. Another long silence. Then Councillor Sthex asked the question everyone was thinking. What do we do with them? Quelloch had been dreading this question, because there was no good answer. They couldn't send the humans back without risking them telling Earth about the Concordance. They couldn't keep them indefinitely without violating 17 different rights agreements. They couldn't integrate them without risking systemic contamination of other species. They couldn't eliminate them without violating the fundamental principle of the Concordance: peace at all costs. I don't know, Quelox admitted. That's why I called this session. We need to decide, together, as a concordance, what do we do about a species that breaks our rules just by existing? The debate that followed would later be remembered as the 7-hour argument, though that was misleading because it was really more like 70 hours spread across multiple sessions. Councillors argued, subcommittees formed, reports were commissioned, experts were consulted, forms were filed. And while the concordance debated what to do about the humans were having problems of their own. Renner was going insane, not literally, probably not literally, but after 5 days of being stuck in what was essentially a very nice prison cell, she was starting to understand why solitary confinement was considered torture. It wasn't that the accommodations were bad. They were great, too great. Everything was clean, everything was efficient, everything was perfect. And that was the problem. There was nothing to fix, nothing to improve, nothing to tinker with. Every system worked exactly as intended, which meant there was nothing to do except sit and wait while bureaucrats in another building decided her fate. Davrik was handling it slightly better, mostly because he'd discovered that the entertainment system had access to a galactic database of historical records, and he'd spent the last 5 days reading about the Great Conflict with the fascination of someone watching a train wreck in slow motion. "It's fascinating," he said, not looking up from his display. "The war lasted 700 years. 700 years, and it started because 2 species couldn't agree on trade routes." "Great," Renner said, pacing. "That's great. Good for them. Meanwhile, we're still stuck here." Jofia was handling it worst of all. She'd taken apart and reassembled everything in their quarters, at least twice. She'd optimized the lighting system. She'd reorganized the storage compartments. She'd even tried to improve the door lock, which had resulted in a very stern conversation with security about unauthorized modifications to concordance property. "I need to fix something," Jofia said, staring at the walls like they'd personally insulted her. "Anything! Give me something broken, please! I'm begging you!" "Everything here works perfectly," Davrik said. "That's the point. That's the problem," Jofia shouted. "Don't they get it? Things should break. Inefficiency is how you find better solutions. If everything's already perfect, there's no room for improvement." Renner stopped pacing. "Say that again." "What?" "The thing about inefficiency and improvement." Jofia blinked. "If everything's already perfect, there's no room for improvement?" Renner's eyes widened. "That's it. That's why they're scared of us. We're not dangerous because we're violent. We're dangerous because we're inefficient. We break things, we improve things, we change things, and they've spent 10,000 years making sure nothing changes." "Okay, sure," Davrik said, finally looking up from his reading. "But how does that help us get home?" Renner thought about it. Then she thought about the Concordance's obsession with rules and protocols. Then she thought about the one thing that every bureaucracy fears more than anything else. "We're going to file a complaint," she said. Both her crew members stared at her. "A complaint?" Jofia asked. "A formal complaint against the Concordance for unlawful detention, due process violations, and denial of our right to free movement." "Renner, we don't have rights. We're not part of the Concordance." "Exactly," Renner grinned. "We're not part of the Concordance, which means Concordance law doesn't apply to us. They can't detain us using their laws because we never agreed to follow their laws. We're not their citizens. We're not their subjects. We're independent." Davrik caught on. "And if they're detaining us anyway, they're violating their own principles about respecting species sovereignty." "Oh, that's good," Jofia said, her eyes lighting up. "That's really good. We're going to tie them up in their own red tape." "Exactly. They love rules, so we're going to use their rules against them. We're going to file so many complaints and grievances and formal protests that they'll have to let us go just to make us shut up." It was a plan born of desperation and spite. It was probably going to fail spectacularly. But it was something, and something was better than nothing. Renner called up the room's communication system. "Hello, hello! I would like to speak to, whoever handles complaints." There was a long pause, then Willick's voice, sounding tired. "Captain Quisk, what do you want?" "I want to file a formal complaint against the Concordance for unlawful detention." Another long pause. You want to file a complaint?" "Yes, a complaint. I assume you have forms for that." We have forms for everything, Captain." "Excellent. I'll take 17 of them, one for each human right you're currently violating." A much longer pause. Then, almost grudgingly, "I'll have them sent to your quarters." The forms arrived within the hour. There were, in fact, 53 different complaint forms, each more complex than the last. There were forms for filing grievances against individual officers, forms for filing grievances against departments, forms for filing grievances against the Concordance as an institution. There were forms for requesting hearings, forms for requesting mediators, forms for requesting reviews of previous forms. It was glorious. Renner, Davrick, and Joffia spent the next 3 days filling out every single form with meticulous attention to detail. They documented every minute of their detention, every meal that wasn't quite right, every slight discomfort, every moment of boredom. They cited concordance regulations about species sovereignty. They cited interspecies law about unlawful detention. They even found an obscure provision about the right to pursue commercial activities without unreasonable restriction, which technically meant the Concordance was violating their right to deliver frozen meat. They filed 53 separate complaints, and then they waited. The response came faster than expected. High Administrator Quelox herself appeared via hologram in their quarters, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "Captain Quisk," she said wearily, "what exactly are you trying to accomplish?" "I'm trying to go home," Renner said cheerfully, "but since you won't let me go home, I'm exercising my right to formal complaint procedures." "You don't have rights under Concordance law. You're not a member species." "Then you can't detain me under Concordance law. I'm not subject to your jurisdiction." Quelox closed all 6 of her eyes. "Captain, you're technically correct, but that doesn't change the situation. You've accessed restricted space. You possess knowledge of the Concordance. You represent a potential security risk. Then charge me with something. Put me on trial. Give me a hearing." "We can't. You're not subject to our courts. You just said that." "Exactly. So either I'm subject to your laws, in which case I get due process, or I'm not subject to your laws, in which case you can't detain me. You can't have it both ways." Quelox opened her eyes and stared at Renner with what might have been grudging respect. "You're doing this on purpose." "Doing what?" "You're exploiting contradictions in our legal system. You're finding loopholes. You're weaponizing bureaucracy." "I'm trying to go home." "By breaking our system." "Your system is already broken. We just showed up and it started falling apart. That's not our fault." The hologram flickered. Quelox took several deep breaths, cycling through multiple colors before settling back to her normal shade. "Captain Quisk," she said slowly, "the High Council is currently debating what to do about your species. The debate has been contentious. There are councillors who want to quarantine Earth permanently. There are councillors who want to integrate you immediately. There are councillors who want to study you like laboratory specimens. And there's one councillor who wants to pretend you don't exist and hope you go away." "And what do you want?" Renner asked. Quelox was quiet for a long moment. "I want to understand why 3 people in a broken-down cargo ship managed to do what nobody's done in 10,000 years. I want to know if you're a threat or an opportunity. I want to know if letting you go back to Earth is going to start a chain reaction that destroys everything we've built." She paused. "But mostly, I want to stop getting 53 complaint forms a day. Then let us go." "I can't. Not yet. The Council hasn't decided. How long will that take?" "Years, probably. Maybe decades. Councillor Vrex hasn't made a decision faster than 6 months in his entire life. Renner felt something snap inside her, not violently, just cleanly, like a rope that had been pulled too tight for too long. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to let us go. You're going to give us our ship back. You're going to show us how to get home. And you're going to do it within the next week." "Or what?" Quelox asked. Renner smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Or I'm going to teach every other detained species in this facility how to file complaints. And then I'm going to help them file, all of them, constantly, until your entire administrative system collapses under the weight of its own paperwork." Quelox stared at her. "You wouldn't." "I absolutely would. You think I'm bluffing? I spent 8 years hauling cargo through the solar system. I've dealt with customs agents on 3 different planets. I know exactly how to weaponize bureaucracy. That's terrorism. That's paperwork. Your rules, your system. I'm just using it." The hologram flickered again. Quelox looked like she was contemplating several different varieties of murder, none of them legal under concordance law. "1 week," she said finally. "1 week for the Council to make a decision. If they haven't decided by then, we'll discuss alternatives. Alternatives like letting us go. Alternatives like not throwing you out an airlock." The hologram vanished. Davrik whistled low. "Well, that went well." "Did it?" Jofia asked. "Because it sounded like she just threatened to space us." "She won't," Renner said, though she wasn't entirely sure. "It would violate too many protocols. She'd have to fill out forms for months." "Assuming we live that long," Davrik muttered. But Renner's gambit had an effect she hadn't anticipated. Word spread. In a facility full of detained beings from various unintegrated species, word always spreads. Within 2 days, 17 other species had filed formal complaints against the concordance. Within 4 days, the number was 43. Within 6 days, the administrative system was showing what the engineers called critical stress indicators, which was a polite way of saying it was on the verge of complete collapse. And on the 7th day, the Council called another emergency session. Councillor Vrex stood in the center of the chamber, looking like he'd aged several decades in the past week. "Fellow councillors, we have a problem. Actually, we have several problems, but they're all related to the same source, the humans." He pulled up a display showing the complaint queue. It was extensive. "In the past week, we have received 9,472 formal complaints. This is more than we typically receive in a century. Our administrative staff is overwhelmed. Our legal department is threatening to quit, and our detention facilities are on the verge of mutiny." "And it's all because of the humans?" Councillor Sistex asked. "Not directly. But Captain Quisk has apparently been teaching other detained species how to exploit loopholes in our legal system. She's turned compliance into resistance. She's weaponized our own bureaucracy against us." Councillor Jean's crystalline voice rang out. "Can't we simply ignore the complaints?" "We could," Vrex admitted, "but that would mean abandoning our own principles. The complaint system exists to ensure fairness and justice. If we ignore legitimate complaints, we're admitting that our system is a sham, that we only follow our rules when it's convenient. But if we process all these complaints," Councillor Prax said slowly, "it will take decades, and in that time, more complaints will be filed. It's a death spiral of paperwork." High Administrator Quelox, watching from the gallery, felt a grim sort of satisfaction. The humans had done in 1 week what no enemy had managed in 10,000 years. They'd proven that the Concordance's greatest strength, its bureaucratic machinery, was also its greatest weakness. All you had to do was feed it until it choked. Councillor Vrex continued. "We have 3 options. 1, we process all complaints through proper channels, which will take decades and potentially destabilize other systems as word spreads. 2, we ignore the complaints and admit our system is hypocritical, which will undermine trust in the Concordance as a whole. 3. We let the humans go and hope they don't spread this knowledge to their homeworld. Option 3 isn't really an option, Councillor Sthex pointed out. If we let them go, they will tell Earth about us, and if Earth knows about us, they'll try to contact us, and if they contact us, we'll be right back where we started. Unless, Councillor Jean said thoughtfully, we make a deal with them. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. What kind of deal? Vrex asked cautiously. We let them go. We give them their ship. We show them how to get home safely, and in exchange they agree to keep the Concordance a secret, at least until their species is ready for formal contact. And why would they agree to that? Councillor Prax asked. Queloch stood up. Because Captain Quisk doesn't want to destabilize the galaxy. She's not malicious. She's not power-hungry. She just wants to go home and deliver her meat. If we give her what she wants, she'll give us what we want. Time. Time for what? Sthex asked. Time to figure out what to do about Earth. Time to adapt our systems to handle species that don't fit our models. Time to decide if we're going to stay static forever or if we're going to evolve. The chamber was silent. Finally, Councillor Vrex spoke. All in favor of option 3, with negotiations for mutual secrecy. 231 hands, appendages, pseudopods, and energy fields signaled agreement. Motion passes, Vrex said. Administrator Quelox, you're authorized to negotiate with the humans. Get them off this station before they teach anyone else how to break our bureaucracy. Renner was in the middle of teaching a Bolvian detainee how to file a cross-species grievance when the door to their quarters opened and Quelox walked in, not a hologram, the actual High Administrator in the flesh, or whatever she was made of. Renner still wasn't entirely clear on alien biology. Captain Quisk, Quelox said without preamble. You win. Renner blinked. What? You win. The Council has authorized your release. Your ship is being refueled and repaired as we speak. We'll provide you with updated navigation data and a proper wormhole authorization code so you don't accidentally end up somewhere else. Ridiculous. We can go. Just like that. Not just like that. In exchange, you will agree to keep the Concordance's existence secret from Earth. No broadcasts. No reports. No evidence of our existence, at least until such time as Earth has developed proper superluminal travel and can petition for membership through proper channels. Renner's mind raced. And if we don't agree? Then you remain here while we process 9,000 complaints, which will take approximately 47 years. 47 years? Give or take. Bureaucracy moves slowly. It wasn't really a choice. Renner knew that, but at least it was a choice that let her go home. Fine, she said. We'll keep your secret on one condition. Quelox's skin shifted to wary purple. What condition? You fix whatever let us through your wormhole in the first place. Because if we could stumble through accidentally, someone else will too. And next time it might be someone who doesn't just want to deliver meat. Quelox actually smiled. It was small and tired, but genuine. We're already working on it. Our engineers are very motivated after this incident. Good. Renner extended her hand. Then we have a deal. Quelox looked at the hand with confusion. What am I supposed to do with that? It's a handshake. It's how humans seal agreements. You touch appendages? That seems unsanitary. It's traditional. With obvious reluctance, Quelox extended one of her 7-fingered hands and briefly touched Renner's. Then she immediately pulled out what looked like an antibacterial wipe. Your ship will be ready in 6 hours, Quelox said. I suggest you use that time to say goodbye to all the detainees you've been radicalizing. I wasn't radicalizing them. I was educating them. You taught a Centauri refugee how to file a complaint in 17 different languages simultaneously. That's not education, that's psychological warfare. Renner grinned, maybe a little. Quelox shook her head, her tentacle hair writhing in exasperation. Captain Quisk, In the 10,000 years of the Concordance's existence, nobody has caused more disruption in less time than you and your crew. You've exposed flaws in our legal system, challenged our fundamental assumptions, and forced us to confront the reality that our perfect peace might be perfectly stagnant. She paused. I'm not sure whether to thank you or ban your species from ever leaving your solar system. Why not both? Renner suggested cheerfully. Get off my station, Captain. Before I change my mind. 6 hours later, the presumptuous narwhal was ready for departure. The repairs had been extensive. The Concordance engineers had done excellent work, which meant the ship now looked too clean, too functional, and entirely unlike the charming disaster it had been before. It's weird, Jofia said, running her hand along the newly sealed hull plates. Everything works. I don't trust it. I give it a week before something breaks, Davrik said. And then we'll feel at home again. Renner stood in the cargo hold, looking at their frozen synthetic meat supply. Still intact, still frozen, still absolutely meaningless compared to what they'd experienced. Willick had come to see them off, along with a small crowd of Concordance officials who looked very relieved to see them leaving. Captain, Willick said, I've loaded the navigation data into your system. The wormhole authorization codes are programmed in. You should have a smooth journey back to Earth. Should have. Wormhole travel is never entirely predictable, but it should be significantly less chaotic than your previous transit. That's comforting. Captain, Willick hesitated. May I ask you something? Sure. Why? Why did you fight so hard to leave? You could have stayed, learned about the galaxy, become ambassadors for your species. Instead, you threw bureaucratic chaos at us until we released you. Why? Renner thought about it. Because we had a job to finish. Because our crew is waiting for us on Callisto Station. Because there's frozen meat in our hold that people paid for. Because... She paused. Because as amazing as the Concordance is, it's not home. And home is where you're supposed to be. Willick's tentacle hair formed something that might have been a sad smile. That's very human of you. I'll take that as a compliment. It wasn't necessarily one. They shook hands again, Willick wincing only slightly. One more thing, Willick said as they headed for the airlock. When Earth does develop proper superluminal travel, when you do eventually petition for membership, please go through the proper channels, fill out the forms, follow the protocols. Don't just show up. Renner grinned. No promises! The presumptuous narwhal pulled away from Thelonious Prime with significantly less drama than it had arrived with. The wormhole transit was smooth, controlled, and almost boring. Renner found herself missing the chaos of their first journey when everything was exploding and nothing made sense. They emerged 12 light years away, back in the solar system, right where they'd started. Home, Davrik said softly, looking at the familiar stars. Home, Jofia agreed. With frozen meat still in the hold, Renner added cheerfully. We might actually make this delivery. Captain, Davrik said carefully, we've been gone for 8 days. Our delivery was supposed to take 4. We're going to lose our bonus. Are you kidding? We discovered a galactic civilization. We exposed systemic flaws in a 10,000-year-old bureaucracy. We started what might be the first stirrings of reform in an ancient empire. Who cares about the bonus? Our creditors probably care. Details! They flew toward Callisto Station, the presumptuous narwhal rattling in its familiar, comforting way. Something in the engine room was already making a concerning noise, which meant they were back to normal. So, Jofia said, we're really not going to tell anyone about the Concordance. Renner thought about it, about Quelox's tired eyes, about the Council's desperate need for stability, about 10,000 years of peace built on everyone staying exactly where they were and doing exactly what was expected. We made a deal, she said finally. We'll keep it, for now. But for now? Well, Earth's going to develop FTL eventually, and when we do, the Concordance is going to have to deal with us properly. with all 8 billion of us. And somehow, Renner smiled. I don't think they're ready for that. Nobody's ever ready for humanity, Davrik said. That's the beauty of it. They docked at Callisto Station 4 days late, with frozen meat that was somehow still perfectly frozen, despite traveling 12 light-years, getting caught in a bureaucratic nightmare, and being stored in a ship held together with duct tape and optimism. The station manager took one look at their delivery receipt, stamped it late, docked their pay, and told them they had a new contract waiting if they wanted it. Same route? Renner asked. Same route. We'll take it. They would make that run 17 more times over the next year, and each time Renner would look at the spot where they'd found the wormhole and wonder what was happening out there in the Concordance. Were they really fixing the wormhole security? Or were they just adding more forms? Were they questioning their 10,000-year-old systems? Or were they doubling down on control? She would never know. But 12 light-years away, in sub-basement 7 of the Concordance archives, Zilvex Prenderquist was filling out his 5-century performance review, and in the section marked Notable Achievements, he wrote, Discovered humanity. Results significant. The word was in all capitals. He figured it was appropriate.